So in a new State Department report, this is a report that is sent to Congress yearly, and it's a report, it's part of the 1990 PLO Compliance Act. So it's something that Congress requires the State Department to report on to Congress. And in this report, the Biden administration omitted specific references to the Palestinian government's ongoing calls for violence, as well as its support for the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, the BDS movement. Both issues, which are tracked in Congress, which are obviously, we saw conflict in the Middle East just recently, they were included in the Trump administration's report from the State Department to the Congress, but they were deleted.
This is an effort by the State Department to try to backfill Secretary Blinken's promise that he's not going to release this funding unless the Palestinian Authority reaches these metrics. Well, how do you meet these metrics? Maybe you just pull them out of your report and turn a blind eye to them.
It is not just for political purposes. This is not just to appease some anti-Israel left in the United States. So that certainly can be part of it. It is a workaround existing U.S. law, which if they were to admit in the report that the terrorism was occurring and the incitement was occurring and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement was being supported by the Palestine Authority, and that would be possible that the funds we send over could be used for those efforts, which the Trump administration said was happening, so we're not going to send those funds. Now the Biden administration just deletes it from history. Deletes it. Like it exists right now. It's ongoing now. It's like it never happened. It was like it was never reported to Congress.
The Palestinian Authority is simply a legal entity that's a successor to the PLO, a terrorist organization. It is not in compliance, which means it remains a terrorist organization. And the Biden administration is saying we must create a state using this organization. And so they're trying to whitewash this. They are sending them hundreds of millions of dollars, which, as we know, the Palestinian Authority is using to fund terrorists. And now they are trying to eradicate from the record the fact that this ongoing incitement and violence and payment for terror is going on.
The idea with the law, then, Jordan, is to not allow the Palestinians to get money from the United States if, in fact, this kind of activity is still going on. And the Compliance Act, it's almost 30 years old, this Compliance Act, the idea was you have to comply with this and certify. The State Department certifies it, and the previous administration, the Trump administration, said no, they are still engaged in BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction, and they are also teaching this in the schools. We pointed this out, Jeff, in our filing with the United Nations General Assembly's Human Rights Council. Let me go to Jordan, actually. We stated specifically that both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority vigorously teach anti-Semitism in their education system. The Palestinian Authority teaches children to anticipate the end of Israel and subsequent reunification of Palestine as one nation. The UN condemned the PA and Hamas for adopting school curriculum and textbooks that taught hate towards Israeli, that was akin to child abuse, is what the UN said. But yet our own State Department here is saying exactly the opposite. They're just removing it.
This is not only immoral but unlawful. There are congressional requirements. This reporting is required to be factually accurate. I think they know the Palestinians are inciting violence, so to leave that out of the report would just be to gild the lily, be to avoid the facts as they're known. There has to be a purpose for that. The purpose would be to make sure that when they go to underwrite the Palestinians, whether that's through the UN relief agency, UNRWA, that is completely corrupt, or whether it's another method that they're going to use to underwrite the Palestinian leadership, that they can say, well, we didn't violate the Taylor Force Act, something no administration wants to be on the record for, but this one appears intent on doing.
Just the corruption alone would be a reason not to send any money, because people like Mahmoud Abbas are billionaires, and yet their only job has been leader of a territory of a pretty small group of people.
Yeah.
And yet they're billionaires. Why? Because they siphon off money from countries like the U.S. who are willing to keep paying into this Palestinian lie.
The point of what they're doing is to try to change the report by making those two omissions, or to editing those out, so that they can lay the predicate for funding.
Why is the Biden administration doing this? And I think at the end of the day, they are preparing the United States to capitulate, essentially to terror, because the Biden administration is trying to follow into the gigantic footsteps of the Obama administration. Exactly. And the Obama administration did what? it basically paid Iran to join the Iran nuclear deal.
This is basically the same people now just being promoted.
It's Obama too. It's the same people who were there before President Trump became president. Every one of them.
Except they've been promoted.
And now they're in higher positions with more authority and more influence and more policy-making decisions and more influence on American relations to the Middle East and throughout the entire world.
They went joined from the State Department. Now they're at the White House.
A deliberate move to subvert U.S. law that would prevent the funding going to the Palestinian Authority if you acknowledge these acts of terror and the promotion of terror, the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement against Israel, because the Taylor Force Act. And again, taking a report and basically copying and pasting it, but deleting key provisions, not by accident, not just for political purposes to send a message about what they think about the Palestinians, but intentionally.